مساء الخير جميعا، يا رب تكونوا كلكم بخير وبصحة جيدة. إن شاء الله تعدي الفترة دي على خير بإذن الله. Okay, today we'll start chapter 4. I know we started it already last week in the actual lecture, but we'll start it all together from the very beginning to avoid any confusion due to the current circumstances. زي ما انتم كلكم عارفين chapter 3 we covered the production side, the supply side, and the use of factors of production, namely labor demand, and labor supply. So more or less we were looking at the production, the aggregate supply side. In this chapter we will look at the aggregate side with its main two components, consumption and investment. The chapter is divided into three main parts: consumption and saving, that we discussed last time, and the factors affecting them or determining them, but we will discuss again. And then we will move to investment, and finally closing the chapter by understanding how to reach the market equilibrium for goods and Okay, the starting point is the income expenditure identity that you know by heart, I assume, by now, since last year, and this year we covered it again in chapter 2, equating both sides. And you all know that this identity applies at any point. It's not related to equilibrium. At any point, the three approaches to measuring output are equal. So income, as you can see, with denoting it with Y, or output as measured by GDP, for example, is always equal to the aggregate demand or the aggregate expenditure, aggregate spending, with its main components: consumption, investment, government spending, and exports, and we subtract imports. But for simplicity reasons, to facilitate the analysis, we will assume that we are in a closed economy where we don't have exports nor imports. And also, further, we will assume that government spending or government purchases is a fixed value, given. That is, it's given to the model. We don't have a say in it, so it's a fixed value. And this assumption is more or less a logic, because this variable is usually determined by political decisions out of our control, I mean. Okay, consumption and investment both actually have a specific nature. Consumption constitutes the main, by consumption I mean household consumption. Private consumption forms the majority of the aggregate spending, aggregate expenditure, exceeding 60%, as you see in Egypt and US, for example, as you see from the both pie charts. So it's very vital to understand it in order to understand the changes in aggregate demand itself. We will be talking usually about desired consumption, desired saving. So the word desired is to differentiate between consumption that appears in the identity that you saw in the previous slide, and the desired consumption that we will be talking about during the whole, throughout the whole chapter. By aggregate, or we are studying macro, so we are concerned about the aggregates, but reaching the aggregates we'll start from the individual level, just in the same norm that we followed in chapter 3. And we will assume what applies on and thus the national level is reached by aggregating what happens on the individual level. So what applies on the individual will apply on the national, consequently. So any factor that increases or decreases or changes desired consumption in a certain direction on the individual level will change it in the same direction on the national level. What do we mean by desired consumption? It's basically, as the word shows, it's the aggregate quantity of goods and services that we households want to consume, given our income and other factors that affect our demand or decisions. As we discussed last time, we said that consumption and savings are two sides of one coin. If I tell you that I earn like £1,000 and I consume 600, then you know you don't have to ask me how much do you save. You know it implicitly. The rest goes for savings, because you know that our income, the disposable income, has two ways to go out, either in the form of consumption or in the form of savings. So going back to the identity that we were talking about, the income expenditure identity, and we can, simple manipulation, we reach the level of the value of the savings, which is merely the output or the income. We subtract from it the value of consumption, whether private consumption or public consumption. So the desired level of savings is equal to the national level of output. We subtracted from it the desired level of national consumption and government purchases, which is given, as we mentioned before. It's needless to say that anyone can consume less than his income or her income, and which means that savings is positive, or consume more than the income by borrowing, for example, or withdrawing from the savings, which we call this saving. As we discussed last time, any decision that we take in our lives is not for free. Everything, there's no free lunch, as we mentioned before. Everything has a trade-off. If I decided to do something, it will be at the expense of another thing. That's the economic cost that we say. So if I decided, for example, we're concentrating on consumption and savings. If I decided to increase my current consumption, I know quite well it will come at the expense of decreasing my future consumption. But what's the price that I'm paying? So let's assume if you put your money, you're putting your money at the bank and you have a saving account, and this saving account brings you an additional amount by the end of the year, which is defined by the real rate of interest, the real interest rate. So for example, if I'm having £100 at the bank, I decided to save them and the interest rate is 10%, I earn by the end of the year 110. So if we looked at it in a different way, that current consumption and future consumption are two products that I decide to trade each other with. I decided to, for example, increase my current consumption, to buy more current consumption, which means that I will increase my current consumption and I have to lose or to forego the £10 that I was going to earn later in the future due to this interest rate. So the cost that I'm bearing is the 1 plus R that I lost due to the decision that I took that by increasing the current consumption. Or the other way, I decided to lower my current consumption, which implicitly means lowering my current consumption means that I need to increase my future consumption, which means implicitly again increasing my current savings. In lowering my current consumption means that I will gain 1 plus R in the future, and I'll gain this 10 extra pounds due to this real interest rate. So as if I'm selling this current consumption and gaining 1 plus R in return. So the 1 plus R represents the relative price of current consumption vis-a-vis future consumption. Or when I say future consumption, means current savings. Okay, so for a given R, we can decide to sacrifice current consumption, to lower current consumption by 1 unit in order to gain 1 plus R unit in the future, as we just mentioned. So future consumption, as we mentioned, is meaning that increasing our current saving today by 1 plus R. Actually, there are two extremes. Either we can, two unrealistic extremes. One can spend all his money. One can consume the current consumption. He spends all his money in current consumption today and leaving nothing for the future. Or he can save all his money and consuming nothing, zero today. Both extremes are totally unrealistic, and all of us, not most, but all of us follow this human instinct of distributing our consumption evenly throughout time, throughout week, month, or whatever the time we're talking about. So this pattern or this desire to evenly distribute our consumption pattern or consumption behavior is called consumption smoothing motive, and this guides us actually in almost all of our consumption decisions. We will discuss then the various factors that determine or affects consumption and saving decisions on individual level and consequently on national level, starting by the effect of increase or the change in current income and change in expected future income and wealth. During this discussion of the first three factors, the real interest rate and the G will be assumed to be given, fixed. And then we'll move to the effect of fiscal policy, the change in taxes, tax rate, or the change in government spending. And then we will change the G that we assumed before to be fixed. And still the real interest rate will be given, constant. And then we'll move to the effect of the changes in real interest rate, where then we will relax the assumption of R being fixed. Now it varies, but the G is still given as a fixed amount. So first we will see the effect of changes in current income. This is the most direct, easy effect, where now y is a variable, not fixed, like the other when we discuss the other factors or the impact of the other determinants. Here the increase in y, or the increase in our disposable income, if talking on the individual level, will result in an increase in both. It will be distributed among the increase in consumption and savings, and the decrease in income will vice versa be replicated in a decline in our desired consumption and desired savings. How can we tell the amount by which consumption changes? You know it by heart, this measure. And I remember, Muhammad, in the lecture, one of your colleagues answered me by the marginal propensity to consume. Marginal propensity, marginal, you know, the change in the dependent variable due to the change in the independent variable by 1 unit. Here the dependent variable is the consumption due to the change in income by 1 unit. So MPC, since income is distributed among consumption and savings, so the MPC is less than 1, and MPC in addition to MPS is exactly to 1. So when current income rises, the desired consumption will rise, but with a lower increase than Y, or than income. And also the desired savings will increase. So we can reach the conclusion that on the national level, output increases, the national desired level of consumption will increase, and also the desired level of savings will rise. Regarding expected future income, we also discussed it last time. لو تفتكروا الإكزامبل اللي هو كنت بقوله لكم دايما، اللي هو الصديق ليا اللي كان منتظر البروجكت الكبير اللي كان هيديله فلوس في in the very near future, and accordingly he decided to increase his current consumption by traveling, taking his family, bringing them gifts, and so on. So whenever we do expect an increase in our future income, again, our instinct tells us that, okay, we can afford an increase in current consumption. Again, due to this consumption smoothing motive, we will increase our current consumption to distribute this expected increase among the current time, or the between now and later. Okay, so the increase in expected aggregate output, jumping from the individual level to the aggregate level, would consequently increase the desired consumption, and thus reduces savings. Why does it reduce savings? Because our current income, the actual current income, didn't change. Moving again to the individual level, my friend or my colleague didn't change. The current income didn't witness any increase. It was still fixed. What witnessed the increase? Just his expectations for the future income. So the current income is still fixed, and therefore when we expect a future increase in our income, we increase our consumption, but we have no other way out. We have to decrease our savings. And then moving again to the aggregate level, we can easily jump with confidence to this conclusion that the increase in expected aggregate income, Y, increases CD, but reduces the S, the desired savings. In the same manner, also the effect of changes in wealth affects also our consumption decisions. If we do just in the same manner like the increase in expected future income. If we receive, for example, an unexpected increase in wealth that we were not taking in account, and our current income is still as it is, didn't change, so we also our motive, this consumption smoothing motive, will tell us, or will lead us to the decision to increase our current consumption. And yet our current income didn't change. So therefore we have to reduce the savings. Moving to the aggregate level, the increase in wealth on the aggregate level increases the aggregate consumption, that is aggregate desired consumption, and reduces the aggregate saving, the desired savings. And of course, the reduction is the other way around. Okay, and now comes the effect of the real interest rate. Now we will start to loosen the assumption of a fixed real interest rate. Real interest rate has the change in real interest rate has two opposing effects: a substitution effect that we discussed last time, and an income effect. Substitution effect comes from the fact that the increase in interest rate, or the real interest rate, the R, increases the price of our current consumption, which means that we automatically, when this happens, this trading between current consumption and future consumption, we would say we would rather lower our current consumption because the price is higher now, and increase our current savings for the sake of increasing our future consumption. So, which means that the increase in the R, the real interest rate, due to this effect, will automatically decrease our current consumption and increase our current savings. Whereas the income effect is totally different. The income effect means that if we are saving money, then we are richer now, and the R is increasing, means that we are richer now, we have more money in the future. Just like this expected income, we will feel that in the future we are expecting more money due to the increase in R, which means that we will increase our consumption. This is one way to look at it. The other way is that now I don't need to save as much as before to achieve my target. So if we took an example, and I've added this example to the slides to make it more clear, if I need to have by the end of the year £4,000, for example, to buy anything that I want, how much should I save under two scenarios: if R is 10% and if R is 20%. So if you do some simple mathematics, so the amount that we want to, the X is the amount that we want to calculate. So how much should I have now when R is 10% to reach this £4,000 target? If you do this simple calculation, you will discover that when R is 10%, I need to save 3,636, whereas if the R is higher, I need to save less. So when R goes upwards, when R increases, when the real interest rate increases, I need to save less to achieve the same consumption target in the future, because now I'm richer. Because looking at, as I just mentioned, I'm expecting more income in the future due to this increase in R, and thus I will increase my consumption and I will decrease my savings. Because with less savings, I can achieve the same target in the future, consumption target in the future. So income effect is telling me the other way around. When R increases, savings decreases. It leads us to have more consumption, lower savings. Whereas the substitution effect tells us that the price of current consumption is higher, then we have to lower our current consumption and increase savings. So both are opposing effects. But income effect differs. Now we were talking, all الدiscussion دي كانت ان انا بتنطبق على حالة ان انا saver. I have money, I save money. Okay, now I'm saving the 3,000 something, but to reach the 4,000 target. But what if I'm a borrower? It's the other way around. If I'm a borrower and R increases Again, look at it like an increase in future expected income. When R increases and I'm a borrower, I know that the cost in the future will increase, which means that my future income will decrease. Decreasing the future income will force me to lower the consumption today and thus increase the savings, which is the same direction of the substitution effect. So if I'm a borrower, let's look at the good figure. If I'm a borrower, then the increase in real interest rate would result in decreasing my current consumption and increasing my current savings. Whereas if because I feel poorer now and the cost of the consumption is higher, so I have to decrease my current consumption again and again. Treat it as the borrower is expecting a decrease in his future income because the real interest rate is higher. The other way around for the saver is expecting an increase in his future income because R is higher and he's saving positive amount, which means that this will drive him to increase his current consumption and thus reduce current savings. Okay, this is another way also to look at it. For the saver, both the substitution effect and income effect move in opposing directions. If the R increases, the saver would increase his due to the substitution effect. Both the saver and the borrower would do the same. الاثنين واحد. The price of current consumption increases for both of them. The substitution effect says so that the price of the current consumption is higher, we have to lower the current consumption and thus increase the current savings. But the income effect differs from the saver than the borrower. For the saver, it will make him feel richer and thus increases his current consumption and reduces his current savings. And by the way, you have to put in mind that we are assuming now that income is constant, it's given. So when I increase my consumption, it comes at the expense of my savings and so on. For the borrower, both effects move in one direction. Substitution effect, again, for the substitution effect, my current consumption is becoming more expensive. I will lower my current consumption and thus increase my current savings because the future or expected income now is lower, so I will lower my current consumption and thus the income effect, now I'm poorer, I will lower my current consumption because I feel that my expected income is getting lower. Both of them will move in the same direction. What about the national level? Now we're talking about the individual level. The individual will have some savers and some borrowers. What about the national level? National level increases in they refer to empirical evidence then. The empirical evidence was saying that it moves with supports more the substitution effect. When R increases, this will result in a reduction in current consumption and consequently increases the current savings or the desired savings or the aggregate or the national desired savings. Though the evidence is not robust enough, but still it is in this direction of the substitution effect, that the increase in R or the real interest rate would result in an increase in current savings. Okay, but the effect is that we have also to take in consideration the real interest rate, the taxes, in the tax effect. The interest income, the nominal interest income, is defined by the I. And you took before that we have to take, in order to know the purchasing power of my income, I have to exclude the inflation effect. So the nominal interest rate, we subtract from it the expected inflation rate to reach the real interest rate, the expected real interest rate. So the expected real interest income is taxed, so I need to make my decision after the taxation. So which means that it depends on my decision. It depends on my level of disposable income. So after paying taxes, so the income tax should be multiplied by the tax rate in order to get the after-tax interest income, real interest income. So this is the if we do this like the equation 4.2, we discover that the relationship between the tax rate and the real interest rate is a negative one. When the tax rate increases, 1 minus t, you see the negative sign. When tax rate increases, the real interest the real interest after tax rate decreases. And this is a more accurate measure to define the direction of the change in our consumption decisions. This is a very simple example under two scenarios for the tax rates on interest income, of course. One is 30% and 20%, and you can see the higher the interest rate for like in example 1, the lower is the expected real after tax interest rate, 1.5 as opposed to 2% when the tax rate was lower, 20%. Okay, now moving to the effect of fiscal policy. Look again at the identity at the bottom of the slide. The desired savings is equal to income minus desired consumption, desired aggregate consumption minus government purchases, or Y minus the public and private consumption, if we can say that. The change, we will assess the fiscal policy by two means. We will change the G, the government purchases, and we will assume a change in tax rate. Okay, so looking as if we are looking at the government budget and playing with items, the main items on the revenue side and on the expenditure or the spending side. On the spending side, عندنا G, the government purchases. If you looked at this identity, when G increases, it has two effects. When G increases, على طول هيبقى result in and we assume that consumption didn't change, and Y in all cases is given, held constant. So automatically لما G bit increase, the SD will decrease, the desired savings will decrease. Okay, so this is a direct impact of the increase in G. An indirect impact is through the change in that would result on the consumption, the individual consumption or the household consumption. How can this happen? If the G increases, يعني الحكومة زودت مشترياتها، هتمولها ازاي? How would it finance this increase? إما إنها تفرض higher taxes, and when the government imposes higher current taxes, means that the people will be facing lower disposable income, and thus they will lower their consumption level, the current consumption. So the CD, the desired consumption, will decline. So the increase in G, you see, the increase in G is opposed with a decline in CD, which would result, if the decline in the consumption, desired consumption, is lower than the increase in G, which is the case, usually the case, of course, this SD will still decline, but with a lower rate than the case if the consumption was not affected. طيب يبقى احنا افترضنا سيناريو ان الحكومة هتمول الزيادة في الجي دي عن طريق زيادة التاكسز. لو فرضت فعلا زيادة في التاكسز زي ما لسه قايلة حالا, the disposable income will decline and thus the desired consumption will decline, resulting still in a decline in my savings, in the national savings, yet with a lower degree عن the first scenario when the government didn't impose any taxes. However, the government can also decide not to increase the taxes, but rather people would expect it, are clever enough. الحكومة دلوقتي زودت المشتريات, زودت government purchases, but didn't change the taxes. So people would expect that the government will increase taxes in the future. So if people expected the government to increase taxes in the future, return back to the case of expected future income. لما expected future income بيقل, we will lower automatically our consumption. our current consumption. So the CD will again, even taxes didn't change, but in case people are clever enough to know that they should expect a decline or an increase in taxes later, and thus a decline in their future income, this will lead them to decrease their current consumption. يا رب تكون واضحة. يعني عندنا حالتين أو 3 حالات إن الإفكت بتاع الجي. أول حالة إن الجي هي اللي تزيد فقط. The increase in G will definitely lower the SD, as you see from the identity, and no effect on my consumption level. Let's assume that. أو الحالة الثانية إن G increases, and this is financed by an increase in the taxes, in the tax rate. ما هتمول الحكومة منين الجوفرمنت purchases اللي زودتها دي؟ طيب لو زودت ال current taxes means that the disposable income of household declines, which means that the consumption will decline. لما consumption decline بصوا تاني على identity، يبقى الجي زادت والconsumption قلت. Definitely the consumption will decrease with a lower rate than the increase in G. So still the savings will decline, but with a lower degree, okay, than before. Before meaning ان الكونسامشن ما تأثرش خالص. تاني حالة ان الحكومة ما تفرضش زيادة في التاكسز، او تالت حالة بقى الحكومة ما تفرضش زيادة في التاكسز، ولكن people are clever enough to know that this increase in G will definitely be financed, if not today, later. يبقى they will expect an increase in the taxes in the future, thus the future income will decline. ده الاكسبكتيشنز بتاعتهم، واحنا شفنا ان expectations بتأثر على قراراتنا النهارده. When I expect a decline in future income, this would affect negatively my consumption level today. هقلل الكونسومشن النهارده. Okay? This is repeating what we mentioned now. Okay. So increase in G, again summarizing what we said, has a direct effect on S, as we saw from the identity, and has an effect also on the savings through the change in consumption, either by changing the taxes or not changing the current taxes, but future. People will expect the future taxes will change. And thus, we can reach with confidence that the increase in G will definitely reduce the savings level. Reducing consumption level, if people will expect the increase in the future of in the increase in taxes in the future, or if it actually increased the taxes now, then the CD will definitely decline. In both ways, the CD will decline. The consumption, the desired private consumption will decline. So on the aggregate level, for a given level of output, a temporary increase in government purchases will reduce both the savings, the desired national savings, and the consumption the consumption at the national level, the desired consumption and on the national level. Okay, now moving to taxes. We discussed now the G, the changes in G. Now we go to the taxes. Now we assume not only Y is given but also the G. دلوقتي مش هنغير ال G is given and Y is still given as before. برضه for simplicity reason let's assume ان الحكومة هتدي اعفاء او تقلل التاكسز not proportional to income, not related to income level, but as a lump sum. يعني كلنا هيقل التاكسز المفروض ندفعها مثلا بمبلغ محدد لينا كلنا، ملوش علاقة بدخلنا. So we said a lump sum tax cut. This lump sum tax cut ايه الإفكت بتاعه على ال savings and consumption, desired savings and desired consumptions as we say. The tax cut for the current time, or if we're looking at now, this tax cut would increase our disposable income and thus increase our desired consumption. But remember, Y is given, Y is constant. Thus it will lower our desired savings. Okay? يبقى أول حاجة لما يحصل tax cut هيزود ال disposable income اللي معانا، هنزود ال desired consumption consequently، بس مش هنقدر نزود السيفينجز لأن الواي ما زادتش كلها. يبقى ده هيجي على حساب اللور lower level of desired savings. طيب بس الناس برضو should expectations play a very vital role زي ما قلنا. فده هيخلي الناس to expect in the future اللي أخدناه النهاردة في جبنا هيتاخد منا بكرة. So the government, the decline in the taxes or the tax cut that happened today will be compensated in the future by an increase in tax. طب increase in tax in the future ده معناه ايه؟ lower expected future income. lower expected future income شفناها قبل كده معناها ايه؟ lower current consumption level. okay? lower consumption level meaning that it's the opposite direction of the first effect. يبقى معناها ان if people are clever enough ان هم يفهموا ان tax cut دي will be compensated later by an increase in taxes, they might not change their consumption decision totally لانه عارفين انه اللي هم هياخدوه النهارده هيتاخد منهم بكره. The increase in their current income will be taken from them in the future, will be offset by a decline in their future income. So the effect on it might rise or fall or not change totally. The impact of tax cut on consumption could be the three. ممكن إن هم they might not be clever enough, so the increase or the tax cut will increase the disposable income and thus increase their current consumption. صح؟ And lower their current savings. Right? This is one effect. Another effect if they are intelligent enough وهيعرفوا ان future income ممكن يقل جدا وبالتالي يقللوا consumption جدا today and increase savings today. Or they believe that this will exactly offset this. And in this case they won't change their consumption decision today. وده بالضبط اللي قاله David Ricardo in his proposition. قال ان ال government if it targeted to boost the economy through tax cuts, for example, or through fiscal policies that intend to boost the economy, people would expect, due to people expectations, this change in policy might not result in any effect خالص لأن الإفكت بتاع النهاردة will be offset by the expectation in the future, by another effect in the future in the opposite direction زي ما شفنا. So again التاكس كات بتاع اللي ممكن الحكومة تقوم بيه دلوقتي ممكن يحصل عنه increases في ال current disposable income دلوقتي وبالتالي يزود لي current consumption and lowers my savings level. Or people intelligent enough to expect that this tax cut will be opposed by an increase in tax, will be offset by an increase in tax in the future. Increase in tax in the future means the lower expected future income. فبالتالي تقلل الconsumption النهارده وتزود السيفينجز. The opposite, just the opposite. They can exactly offset each other وده ال Ricardian equivalence proposition. الempirical evidence الحقيقة ما كانتش برغم ان this proposition is very sound and very logic لكن empirical evidence was not on his side actually. Okay, this is exactly what we were saying. You can read it in detail. And this summarizes the various factors that we're talking about. Let's look at them تاني and their effect on national savings, desired national savings or desired national consumption. ما احنا قلنا الاثنين are two sides of one coin. Current output وده كان أسهل واحد. هنا الواي بتتغير. الزيادة اللي هتحصل في current income هتتوزع على ال consumption and savings. Both will increase, both will rise according to the value of my MPC and accordingly MPS of course. And the other variable can expected future income or expected future output. Now we're talking about the national level بقى. But what applies on the individual we agreed all together will apply on the national. expected future income ده هيخليني الزيادة فيه هتخليني to spend to decide to increase my consumption today and lower my savings. هنا ال Y is fixed. Okay. And then and thus the increase in my current desired consumption will be at the expense of lowering my desired savings. The same goes for the wealth. My current income did not change. My current income is still is still didn't witness any change. وبالتالي increase in wealth هيخليها نفس تأثير بالظبط increase in expected future income، وهيزود لي consumption current consumption now, which will result at the expense of decreasing my savings now. وكلمنا على الاكسبكتد ريل انترست ريت. هنا ابتدينا نغير كل اللي فاتوا، الويلث والاكسبكتد فيوتشر اوتبوت والكرنت اوتبوت، كل دول الانترست ريت فيها ثابته، الار الريل انترست ريت ثابته، والجي ثابته، الجفرمنت بيرتشيسز. الاكسبكتد ريل انترست ريت ليه مكتوب probably rise؟ زي ما شفنا احنا قلنا ان في substitution effect وفي income effect. السبستيوشن effect ان current consumption بيبقى اغلى لما الار بتزيد، بيبقى more expensive, and thus we will decrease our current consumption and increase our current savings. والincome effect if we are saving money هيبقى حاسين ان احنا الاكسبكتد انكم اللي جاي زياده، وبالتالي هزود الكرنت كونسومشن دلوقتي وهقلل السيفنجز. so the other direction. والعكس للبارور. اوكي ورابع او خامس فاكتور الجفرمنت بيرتشيسز، الانكريس فيها بيؤدي لي زي ما شفنا ديكلاين في السيفنجز. ممكن ان هو يزود ال desired consumption as we saw through taxations that they actually implement to finance the increase in G, or through expected taxes in the future. فبالتالي الناس هتبقى expect their future income to be less, so they will decrease their current consumption. واخر حاجه التاكسز زي ما شفنا دلوقتي ان هي ممكن تبقى ليها برضو ambiguous effect، ان ممكن ان تاكسز لو زادت دلوقتي هتقلل لي الكارنت انكم، وبالتالي هقلل الكارنت consumption. اوكي بس I will expect a lower tax in the future، فبالتالي increase my consumption in the future. Those two opposing effects can offset each other، أو واحد يغلب التاني فنمشي في اتجاه معين، فالeffect is more or less ambiguous زي ما قلنا في الدiscussion اللي فاتت. طبعا لازم تبقوا كل الفاكتورز اتجاهاتهم وتأثيرهم على الناشونال سيفينجز مفهومة، فبليز read them carefully. Okay, moving to investment. Why is investment important? زي ما شفنا consumption and investment are two main components في aggregate demand. Investment is a volatile component, very volatile, is hardly hit during recessions and booms tremendously during booming phases. So understanding investment is very vital to understand from one side the business cycles, those fluctuations in output that any economy can and will or have witnessed, and also investment means increasing the capacity or the ability to produce. زي ما احنا قبل كده ناقشنا كتير، investment increases the ability of the whole economy to expand, and thus we're talking about economic growth. So in understanding investment will facilitate the understanding of economic growth. زي ما شفنا قبل كده investment can be residential, non-residential, inventory investment, and so on. Residential in houses and so on, building factories, buying machines, improvement in softwares، كل دي أنواع للinvestment. كلهم they increase the ability to produce. Okay, we need again the word desired. We need to understand how is the desired capital stock determined. The desired capital stock زيه بالظبط زي ما كنا بنشوف ال amount of labor that the firm decides to employ. لو تفتكروا كنا بنشوف ان هي أي firm is a profit maximizing, it aims at maximizing its profit, and it compares the cost of labor as opposed to the benefit of hiring one additional unit of labor. هيفيدني ايه incremental increase in output that this labor would give me, as opposed to the incremental increase in cost that I will bear. The same applies, exactly the same applies on capital. The desired capital stock is determined in the same manner that the firm, let's say عاقل رشيد المنشأة بتهدف لتحقيق أقصى ربح, maximum profit, to maximize its profit. So again we will compare the cost زي ما عملنا في الليبر بالظبط. You'll compare the cost of any additional unit of capital and the benefit of an additional unit of capital. The cost هنا هيختلف, هيبقى زي بالظبط ما كنا بنتكلم على الويج, بس هنا ليه طبيعة another different nature. And the benefit is more or less the same, the marginal product of capital. As we talked about the real side in labor, we talked about the marginal product of labor. Here we'll talk about the marginal product of capital. But capital has a different nature than labor. When I buy, for example, I'm doing this investment, I'm buying more machines. Let's say زي مكنة التصوير اللي في بين السيارات زي ما قلنا المرة اللي فاتت. I'm buying now more machines. This machine is the investment that I do. يمكن مكنة التصوير the investment is translated into an increase in my ability to produce على طول. لكن في بعض ويمكن برضو ياخد وقت لأني I need time to train people to how to use the machines and to understand how to use them. So it's not instant, which is the usual case. دايما increase the investment لا يترجم ل increase in capital except with a time lag that I need to train people on using the new machine. الماشين دي عقبال ما تعمل لي زيادة في الكابيتال بتاخد time lag. It's not instant. ده ال usual case. فعشان كده لما بنقرر when the firm decides, it doesn't compare the marginal product of capital كده as it is, but the future marginal product of capital. Okay, because it's expected that it won't give me an increase in output today, but rather with a time lag. ده البنفيت بتاع additional unit of capital as measured by the marginal product of capital, and I assume that you all can define or tell me what is the marginal product of capital. A divided by A, the change of what divided by change of what. يعني أعتقد إن أنتوا تقدروا تردوا على ده كويس. It's the change of the dependent due to the change of the independent. So the change in my output due to the change of my input, the capital. Okay, في denominator. So بقدر أعرف منه the contribution of every or the last unit that I added to my capital stock. By how much it contributed to the increase in capital. Okay. And you all know that it is by labor when labor is fixed and we add more capital. ده كله ده we discussed it in chapter 3. We add more capital and more capital. The additional amount that each and every unit of capital adds becomes less and less with the increase of capital units where labor is fixed. كنا واخدين العكس مع زيادة الليبر. Okay. الكوست بقى هو cost of the use of capital, مش cost of capital per se, but the cost of the use of the additional unit of capital, the cost of the use of additional unit of capital. بنسميها user cost of capital, the UC. We'll compare both user cost of capital with the marginal product of capital. يبقى احنا بنتكلم على الريل سايد. لو تفتكروا هنا مش هنخش في النومينال زي ما عملنا في الليبر, هنا بنتكلم على الريل سايد. اليوزر كوست زي ما كنت لسه بقول it replicates الويج في حالة الكابيتال. Okay, or the real wage to be precise. اليوزر cost of capital is the economic cost. بمعنى ايه؟ It is formed of the real interest cost. For example, I borrow money in order to get this machine. Okay, so I pay interest. So the user cost, the first term, شوفوا في equation 4.3 UC, which is the user cost of capital, is equal to the R, the real interest rate, times the price of the capital. Okay, plus طبعا interest rate مش بس ان انا to borrow money, but also I could have used the money instead of buying the machine, that I've put them in the at the bank and I gain interest, or buy bonds or any kind of financial asset and those giving me interest rate. So I decided to sacrifice this instead and use it to in another form. فمعناها ال opportunity cost of the use of money. okay so R either ان انا بدفعها على مبلغ انا بقترضه ده borrowed in order to get the capital, the new capital, or ان انا I'm sacrificing another use of the money that I could have gained interest rate on, in addition to the cost of depreciation. And you know depreciation by now, it's the cost of wearing out of capital. بمعنى in let's say for example when you buy a certain machine today, after 1 year هتبقى مش بنفس سعرها، أكيد سعرها هيقل نتيجة إن الماشين دي بقت نوع قديم and it is used, so there is a wear. إهلاك الإهلاك قيمتها قلت، ما بقتش زي ما يوم ما اشتريتها. So the depreciation rate times, let's say it decreases by 10% times the price of the capital, I get the user cost of this capital. Okay, so the user cost is basically formed of those two kinds of cost: the interest rate that I pay or I forego or I sacrifice, and the depreciation that I lose in the value of this machine, the new machine, the new whatsoever capital good that I invest in. Okay, you see point A, this is the desired capital stock that the firm would like to reach, because any point before A اللي هيكون أكبر marginal product, the future marginal or the expected future marginal product of capital is higher than the cost, the user cost of this additional unit. يبقى من مصلحتي أنا as a firm that targets maximizing the profit to increase the units of capital, to increase the capacity of capital, to move towards the 5, towards the A. If I'm exceeding the A, I'm working at 6,000 cubic feet of this machine, like the oven, the example given to you by the book. Here it's the opposite. The unit or the user cost of capital is higher than the MPK, the marginal product of capital, and then being targeting maximizing the profit, then the interest of the firm would go in the direction of lowering the capital amount that it uses, again from moving from 6 to the lower side towards 5 again. And A exactly both equates, and at this point there is no need to increase or decrease, and the firm exactly maximizes its profit. نفس الطريقة اللي وصلنا لها في الليبر. Okay, now let's move to the what are the variables that would cause shifts in the curves, سواء كان curve the benefit side, the expected future marginal product of capital, or the user cost or the cost side as represented by the user cost, okay, or the real economic cost of using capital. طيب احنا زي ما قلنا ان احنا هنا بنتكلم على profit maximization condition, real economic benefit and the real economic cost. طيب زي بالظبط ما شفنا في in the case of labor markets، شفنا ان the marginal product of labor would also shift due to improvement in technology. The same applies also for capital. إذا حصل أي technological improvement that would result in higher output per unit of capital, or the contribution of capital, the change in output due to the change in the capital, due to the increase in capital units by 1 unit, هيحصل له positive change and increase improvement. This will be due to this technological improvement that resulted in the whole in the shift of the whole curve, the marginal product of capital. Okay, زي مثلا إن في الكتاب بندي مثل على bakery deciding to buy a new solar oven، فرن بيشتغل بالطاقة الشمسية، and comparing both sides. إذا حصل أي technology improvement regarding مثلا a new recipe for a dough that would increase the productivity of the oven, then this is replicated or this is represented by a shift in the whole curve of the marginal product of capital. Okay, meaning that at each and every unit of capital, by using the same unit of capital, we will be having higher level of expected marginal product of capital. Okay, Regarding user cost will shift if any of the components of the user cost change. ايه هما؟ احنا شفنا ان قبل كده when we discussed this يعني ايه user cost of capital. User cost was merely, or the real economic cost of using capital was merely the real interest rate multiplied by the price of capital, the capital good that the firm decides to buy, for example, and the depreciation rate multiplied by the price of the capital good. فأي variable من دول سواء كان ال interest rate, the real interest rate, okay, or the price of the capital, or the depreciation rate changes will cause a shift in the user cost curve. سواء كان a positive shift due to إن هو اتنقل downwards due to the decline in any of those variables, or upwards that would result in an increase in the desired capital stock زي ما هنشوف graphically حالا, or increase in R or PK or D or depreciation rate that would result in lowering the desired capital stock. We will illustrate it graphically. Okay, illustrating this, what we're talking about regarding the changes in any variable that constitutes or defines the user cost would result in the shift of the whole curve. والcurve زي ما احنا متفقين أو عارفين it's a fixed value all over the various capital units used. It is represented by a straight line. إذا حصل any change like lower real interest rate or lower depreciation rate, for example, it will result in shifting the whole curve downwards from UC1 to UC2. Okay, the initial equilibrium or the initial profit maximizing happened at point A, okay, where the desired capital stock was 5,000 of cubic feet of oven capacity. ده نفس الإكزامبل بتاع الكتاب اللي هو السولار oven البيكري اللي هي decide to buy or to invest in this solar oven. This is the initial point, let's say, of equilibrium or profit maximization A, and it employed the desired capital stock of 5,000 cubic feet of oven capacity. What will happen then if the real interest rate declines? The user cost will shift downwards. موضح ان هو ال user cost declined, okay, and from 18 to 16, for example, at the old or the initial equilibrium or the initial point A, في الحالة دي هنا marginal product of capital would be higher. It didn't change. No variables shifted the marginal product curve. Okay, only one of the components of the user cost changed. يبقى user cost curve only will shift. عند البوينت A هنا هنلاحظ ان marginal product of capital is higher than the cost, which will induce the firm to employ more capital and thus increasing it from 5 to 6, for example, till it equates again, till it reaches the point where the MPK is equal to the user cost, or the benefit from employing one additional unit of capital is equal to the cost of employing this additional unit. Okay? Let's move to the effect of the change in marginal product of capital, or the shift of the whole curve. Okay, as for the marginal product of capital, the future expected marginal product of capital, it will shift زي ما قلنا قبل كده due to, for example, improvement in technology that increase the productivity of capital. The same units of capital are able to produce or to contribute higher to my output, or to have a higher positive impact on my output. Which means that the whole curve will shift زي ما illustrated from this graph from MPK1 to MPK2 اللي هو red curve. Okay, shifting the whole curve upwards will result in, طبعا لو بصينا عند ال initial point A هنلاقي ان ال benefit or the marginal product of capital is higher than the cost. UC did not change, the user cost did not change, the marginal product is higher, so the firm would be in the interest of the firm to increase the units of capital that it employs and moves from A to D, or from employing 5 units of capital, or 5,000 units of capital, to 6 units of capital, where again the equality happens between the user cost and the new marginal product of capital value, okay, or curve. And which shows that with this positive impact of the technological advance, this will have a positive impact on my desired capital stock level by increasing it like we see from this example. وده بيحصل زي مثلا الاكزامبل اللي اخدناه في المحاضره بتاع المكن التصوير في بين السرايات. if they for example for some reason they discovered a new software that would increase the productivity of every machine that they use. مثلا هتزود the number of papers that are photocopied by each and every machine, which means the use of the same units of capital would provide me with a higher marginal product of capital or higher contribution to my output using the same amount of capital. اوكي ليه؟ لان انا بقى عندي تكنولوجي احسن زي السوفت وير. بقول مثلا زي هم اكتشفوا سوفت وير بيحسن من انتاجيه every machine, which will result in shifting the whole curve okay to the right and thus increasing my desired capital stock. I would hire more capital units in this case. ليه؟ لان at the initial level the marginal product was higher than the cost, and زي ما شفنا this will induce the firm to employ more units of capital. Okay, I'm repeating this part again due to some technical problem. الصوت ما كانش ظاهر من أول slide 41 onwards, ف I will repeat starting from this slide again عشان نخليها الدنيا واضحة. و many thanks for the attentive students اللي نبهوني للقصة دي، لولا كده ما كنتش هكتشف المشكلة. ف and I made use of this and added some more examples to make the issue more clear. طيب أنا يعني since I'm starting again from this slide, I would like to كده recap everything quickly. إحنا we started talking about investment. After we finished consumption, we're talking about the main two components of aggregate spending. Again, we're discussing the equilibrium in the goods and services market. So aggregate supply, we discussed it in chapter 3, the previous chapter. And in chapter 4, we're discussing the demand side or the aggregate spending side, talking in detail about consumption that we already finished. وبعدين ابتدينا الكلام على الانفستمنت. وانتوا طبعا عارفين ان الانفستمنت is one main vital component of aggregate spending, very crucial to understand. ليه؟ لأن through investment أولا investment is the most volatile component اللي بيتغير جامد جدا، بيزيد جامد جدا وقت البومينج and it witnesses a huge decrease أو بينزل جامد جدا وقت recessions. فthrough the understanding of investment هنقدر نفهم البيزنس سايكلز. طبعا احنا اتكلمنا عن البيزنس سايكلز قبل كده quickly، بس يعني لو في وقت ان شاء الله هنخش فيها السنة دي، لو لا هتدرسوها السنة الجاية. Okay, and then through investment is basically the increase in capital or the change in capital stock, which is translated into the increasing the capacity to produce. through the understanding of investment بنفهم ازاي the long run growth rate of economies بيحصل. اوكي، واتكلمنا برضو في السلايدز اللي فاتت اول ما ابتدينا نتكلم على الانفستمنت how does the firm makes its decisions regarding how many units to employ of capital. نفس الطريقة that we used in labor market we followed here, comparing the two sides, comparing the benefit side. benefit بمعنى contribution of each unit of capital that it makes to my output, والcost side قد ايه انا بتكلف for the cost side, how much do I bear in order to get this additional unit. ده اللي عملناه في الليبر وده اللي عملناه هنا في الانفستمنت. هي نفس الشرط any firm will aim at profit maximization. فبالتالي بتساوي ما بين this happens only when the marginal product of capital, the future or the expected marginal product of capital. طبعا بنقول expected لأن لما بجيب capital unit it won't be in place and it won't be in يعني usually this is the case. يعني sometimes طبعا بتبقى instant effect، لكن بتاخد وقت ان انا زي ما قلت ادرب العمالة اللي عندي انها تستخدم المكنة دي او ف usually the marginal product of capital belongs to the future, is expected. okay, marginal زي ما قلنا قبل كده is the change in my dependent due to the change in my independent, which in this case is the change in my output due to the change in my capital, the capital that I use. Okay, so معناها ايه؟ معناها the contribution of every capital unit that I add to my output, or the change in output due to the change in capital by 1 unit. وعرفنا ان هو diminishing نفس الفكرة لان labor is fixed. ف whenever I increase the capital units, كل increase it will increase my output, yes, but with a diminishing rate or with a decreasing rate. Okay. On the other hand side, we equate it to the user cost. هنا ال user cost هي زي ال wage بالظبط، زي ال real wage. okay. وهنا في حالة الكابيتال زي ما اتكلمنا في السلايدز اللي فاتت هي ال real interest rate. اوكي، لو انا مثلا باخد لون عشان اجيب المكنه دي، ف this is the real interest rate that I pay، مضروبه طبعا في ثمن الكابيتال good that I bought, the machine for example، او the oven in the case of the example used in the book. I would urge you to read this part from the book برضو. The example is quite illustrative. In addition to the depreciation rate لأن المكنة دي كمان سنة it won't have the same value, it won't have the same productivity as today. المكنة النهاردة هتقدر تنتج لي بأعلى من كمان سنة. ف wearing out of this machine or the depreciation in value is replicated or represented by the depreciation rate، طبعا multiplied by the price of capital. ده باختصار ال user cost in the case of capital. طبعا ال real interest rate مش بس اللون، بس احنا قلناها برضو قبل كده، هي برضو فكرة الopportunity cost، ان انا كان ممكن بدل ما اشتري المكنة دي to put the money to buy any kind of non-monetary asset واخد عليه interest rate مثلا. ف the foregone interest rate is also an economic cost, real cost. اوكي، بس عشان نفهم يعني ال real interest rate و depreciation rate او in general the user cost يعني ايه، انا قلته قبل كده بس بعيده تاني عشان احنا زي ما قلت we're starting this part once more. طبعا if the margin product of capital, the future expected margin product of capital was higher or was bigger than the user cost, ده هي-induce the firm to hire more units of capital. okay, and vice versa. إذا الكوست كانت أعلى طبعا مش the firm is losing، هتبقى the common sense would make it lower its use of capital. okay, till it reaches this profit maximizing condition, the equating between the benefit and the cost side. بس things are not that simple. ال comparison دي لازم يخش كمان the company gains the MPK, this is the benefit side, subtracted from it the taxes that it pays for the government. يعني لو قلنا التاكسز بتتفرض على جانب الريفينيوز، فبالتالي جانب الريفينيو أو البنفيت أهو ال MPK represented by the margin product of capital. I have to subtract the tax rate from it, okay, which means it's 1 minus t multiplied by the MPK, the future MPK. okay, ده بقى الشرط الجديد. Now I have to put the taxes in consideration. This is my marginal product of capital after tax, okay, equal to my user cost. This is the new condition in order to maximize the profit. okay, if we divided both sides by 1 minus t، طبعا انتوا فاهمين 1 minus t جت منين. okay, MPK minus the tax rate multiplied by the MPK, we'll take MPK as the common factor, so multiplied by 1 minus t. okay, if we divided بقى both sides by 1 minus t, then the MPK, the condition will be MPK margin product of capital, the future expected margin product of capital is equal to the user cost divided by this term 1 minus t, t the tax rate. okay, وهنا بس بنفصل تاني ال components of the أو definition بتاع ال user cost اللي احنا لسه قايلينه. This is the same but it illustrated in a different manner. تاني زي ما قلت قبل كده أنا بستعين أحيانا بالفيجرز، أو مش أحيانا، كتير جدا بالفيجرز اللي الدكتورة هبة عاطف عاملاها، لأن sometimes I really feel that they are very illustrative. okay, so this is the tax rate on revenues, the after tax future marginal product of capital. We equate it to the firm equates it to the user cost in order to to reach the profit maximization condition or the profit maximization level of employing capital. okay, and we divided both sides زي ما قلنا لسه حالا ب 1 minus t اللي هي 1 minus the tax rate. So it is the future marginal product of capital is equal to the user cost divided by 1 minus t. اوكي طيب ايه اللي هيحصل بقى what will happen if to the desired capital stock. احنا عرفنا ان ازاي ال desired capital stock بيتحدد. what will happen if the t increased. ايه اللي هيحصل لو tax rate increased. let's see through an example. ودي اللي انا ضفتها زي ما قلت لكم عشان to make it more clear. okay if we'll take the two cases كده. if the user cost was $20 per cubic foot per year. انا واخده نفس الاكزامبل اللي في الكتاب الخاص بالسولار اوفن الاوفن اللي بيشتغل بالطاقه الشمسيه ده، او بقى خدوا اي اكزامبل مكنه التصوير اللي قلناها في بين السرايات زي ما كنا بنقول في المحاضره او يعني you have billions of examples for capital goods. So the user cost, let's say it's $20 per cubic foot per year. هناخد two cases. إذا taxes كانت 10% أو إذا taxes increased to 20%. I divide the user cost زي ما شفنا أهو. I divided by 1 minus the tax rate. وعرفنا ده جه منين. Okay. 1 minus 0.1 in the case of when the taxes are 10%. ده كده example. ومرة هنقسمها ب 1 minus 0.2 if the taxes were 20%. طبعا كل ما لو بصيتوا هنا ده الدينومينيتور بتاعي، كل ما الدينومينيتور التاكس ريت بيعلى كل ما الدينومينيتور كله بيقل وبالتالي the whole fraction بيزيد صح. and see this example 1 minus 0.1 which is 0.9 so 20 divided by 0.9 is 22.2 whereas 1 minus 0.2 which is 0.8 okay 20 divided by 0.8 is equal to 25. So the higher the denominator, sorry, the lower is the denominator value, the higher is the whole fraction. Okay. وthe lower بتيجي ازاي؟ لأنها 1 minus, so the lower بتيجي من زيادة التاكس. Okay. That what we subtract from the from 1. Okay. I guess it's more clear دلوقتي ان التاكس ريت لما بتعلى اليوزر كوست اوتوماتيكلي بتعلى. وانتوا شفتوا قبل كده في السلايدز السابقه يعني في التسجيل الاولاني واللي موجود دلوقتي في الشابتر دي في الليكتشر دي ان اليوزر كوست لما بتزيد the whole curve which is we assume it's fixed all over the capital units that we use shifts upwards. okay. وبالتالي the desired capital stock will decline. Go again and do this exercise with the shifts in the marginal product of capital. هيحصل ايه للthat capital stock will shifts in the user cost due to the increase in interest rate, increase in depreciation rate, increase now in the tax rate. هيخلي ال user cost curve all shift upwards and thus resulting in a lower desired capital stock level. Okay. This is basically what we discussed now, written again, that an increase in tax rate raises the tax adjusted user cost and thus reduces the desired capital stock. نفس اللي لسه قايلينه حالا. Okay, but in reality things are not that easy. Taxes are not paid on revenues but rather on profits. زي الأرباح ضريبة الأرباح الرأسمالية في مصر مثلا. Okay. And there are many tax provisions. Tax provisions زي اللي هو المخصص الضريبي اللي هو بقول ازاي الشركة ممكن تحسب الجزء اللي بيتحسب عليه التاكسز. Okay. for example we have the depreciation allowance. Both depreciation allowance we have the two examples depreciation allowance أو investment tax credit. الاثنين both are ways in order to reduce the firm's total tax payment. بنحسب من خلالهم المخصص الضريبي. ازاي بحسب الجزء اللي بيتحسب عليه الضريبة. اوكي. الاثنين مبنيين على فكرة that we deduct a part or the percentage من purchase price of this capital good. Let's say يعني مثلا capital good دي costs 1000 pounds. I deduct like 10% of the price, okay, which is 100 of مرة في حالة ال depreciation allowance من taxable profit, okay. وفي حالة ال investment tax credit I deducted from the total tax bill, okay. لما بعمل كده I lower الأساس اللي بتحسب عليه التاكسز اللي هدفعها للحكومة فبيبقى kind of reducing the total tax payment for the firm. Okay. Just examples for various tax provisions اللي موجودة in reality. يعني الموضوع ما هوش ببساطة قوي يعني it's quite complicated. Okay. Since I just mentioned it's quite complicated they have invented a new measure which is the effective tax rate. It's like an average of the whole system of the whole taxes imposed on firms or on profits. Okay. And the reductions زي اللي شفناها في ال depreciation allowance طبعا ده بيبقى زي مخصص إهلاك. يعني بنقول النسبة دي بتروح تغطي the part that should cover the wear out in capital for example. Okay. بس في الآخر both are ways in order to reduce what the firm pays as in the form of taxes. Okay, the total amount يعني. They invented a certain measure, a hypothetical افتراضي measure which is called the effective tax rate. The effective tax rate, imagine as if it's the average of the whole tax rates on profits in the economy, in addition including بقى كمان reductions زي اللي احنا شفناها دلوقتي. بيحسبوها ليه؟ بيحسبوها على أساس that it would have the same effect on the desired capital stock as the actual provisions of the tax code. Okay? يعني هي بيحسبوها بحيث ان هي تبقى بتمثل نفس التأثير على desired capital stock as in those many complicated various systems of tax provisions زي ما شفنا two examples of reductions for example. Okay? اللي يهمنا من القصة دي طبعا in any change in tax laws that would result in the increase in effective tax rate would result in a shift in the user cost curve upwards, increasing the user cost زي ما شفنا and thus shifting it upwards and therefore lowering the desired capital stock. Okay. بعد كده بقى في الجزء الثاني زي ما انتوا شفتوا او هتشوفوا للناس اللي لسه ما سمعتش الاوديو ليكتشر chapter 4 اسفه part 2 هيلاقوا ان بنتكلم بعد كده on the link between desired capital stock and investment. Okay. طيب I wish you best of luck and I hope it's clear now, and if you have any question again or concerns or any remarks just email me please. Thank you.